It is December 2nd, 2020, and everybody keeps asking me, Taylor, how's business? What's the market doing? How's the market? And, well, it's weird. The market is kind of weird. So I'm going to show you some stats and some analytics. And if you're wondering, weird good or weird bad, in a lot of ways good, in a few ways bad, depends what you're buying, what you're selling. But it's a weird year for obvious reasons, and I've got some data from November, which I want to show you. I'm going to break it down into two categories. I'm going to show you apartments in Calgary. I'm going to show you detached homes in Calgary, and give you a general idea of what the market's doing right now. So let me start with apartments. So there are 6 metrics you're going to see on this sheet here. So for sale, 1,510, up 5.52%. So the inventory got bigger. 1,510 apartments on the market in Calgary right now. Last month, how many sold? 211. That was a good number. That was a bump from the year before, up 12%. But even still, 211 apartments sold in a month, and 1,500 of them on the market. That's over 7 months of supply. That is still very much a buyer's market for apartments. And if you look at listings, new listings, 409 were added to the market. So as you can see, almost twice as many new listings went on the market as sold. So that's a growing inventory situation. Still, that number is down a little bit year over year, down 7%. Not a good picture for the apartment market, but maybe a lot of people in November saw the good deals on apartments, because there's some really good deals on apartments. If you read my 3 under 300 posts, it'll shock you how nice of an apartment you can get for 300 grand in Calgary. The average price down 7%, 235 grand. That's the average price for an apartment in Calgary. And days on market, on average 66. It takes 66 days to sell an apartment in Calgary. That's down a bunch. So that's a little bit of a silver lining there. And then sold versus list price, 95%. So that means people are getting a 5% discount typically on the list price of apartments, or rather that people are selling their apartments for 5% below their asking price. So that number gets bigger as there's more inventory and supply, and it gets smaller as there's less supply and lower days on market. If the market's hot, you sell your property faster and for closer to what you're asking. I'll show you the story in detached. So in detached, totally different situation. Everything's green here. Everything's good. Overall, the market up 26% year over year from November of 2019 to November of 2020. Now that's all real estate in Calgary, not just detached. So that's a 26% increase. 1,437 sales last month. And last November was a really bad month, but still that's going in the right direction. And some of that is still the market recovering from sort of driving over a cliff in April when COVID hit, and playing a little bit of catch up, because 6 months running, sales have increased year over year compared to 2019. 2019 was a pretty crap year, but it's increased. Now year to date, we're still off the 2019 numbers because we took such a big hit in April and May when everything shut down. So anyways, on to detached. 2,244 detached homes on the market. That's down 25%. So that's a huge contraction in supply. The demand is a little lower now too, but the supply is so much lower. It does some interesting things. So 883 detached homes sold in Calgary last month. That's a 25% gain year over year. So people are buying detached homes. There's more detail to that if we break it down. I'll get to that later. New listings, 893 new listings went on the market. So almost dead even with the sold. So the supply is staying pretty steady, and it's like 3 months supply, which are balanced market conditions. The average price went up a little over 3 points. 537K is the average price, sold price for a detached home last month. And the days on market went down a bunch too. 50 days on market is the average for all detached, all prices. That's down 15%. So it takes 50 days on average to sell your detached home. Sold versus list price, that went up 96.62. When things got a little desperate there in the spring, that was as low as 94%. So again, that's how much discount people are getting against the list price. Now, if we were to break this down further, there's two different stories here. If you've got a detached home under 500,000, that's a really hot market and very undersupplied and still lots of demand. And I've got a few theories of where that's coming from. I think maybe part of that is people leaving the inner city, getting rid of their condos, and getting into a detached house. If they're finding with interest rates being as cheap as they are, with pricing having come down as low as it's come in the last few years, people that were looking at an apartment might be thinking, well, take away that $500 or $600 condo fee, and I can afford a pretty decent house for around the same monthly payment. So there's a lot of demand for small entry level under 500K detached homes. The ones I've listed have sold instantly and for list or above list, and that's pretty consistent with my colleagues. If you've got a $350,000 house, I mean, if it's priced right and it's presented well, you sell that in a day. Probably multiple offers and maybe above your list price. Now, different story if you're above 700,000. Still a buyer's market in that area. But the good news is, if you're in a position where you're upgrading and maybe your family circumstances have changed, your lifestyle has changed, and you're going to a bigger house or a nicer house in a better area, you have the advantage of both a seller's market for your entry-level home. You're going to sell that and for good money, and at the same time you have a buyer's market for the step up or the upgrade home that you're looking to buy. So you're going to be able to get a great deal on that. So how's the market doing? Weird, good, weird, bad. Depends what you're doing. If you're buying an apartment, you're in good shape. If you're selling an apartment, you're in tough shape. If you're listing your house under 500 grand, you couldn't have picked a better time. You'll find a buyer for that immediately. The price hasn't gone up a bunch, but it hasn't gone down. The prices are staying pretty steady, but they're selling faster because there's so little supply on the market. In Airdrie, here where I live, it's been crazy. 15% increase in sales year over year last month, and the tightest supply we've had in 6 years. So especially like affordable under 500K detached homes, that's a really hot market right now. Normally this time of year, December, things slow down. People start to take their houses off the market. People don't want to list this time of year. They've got holidays and everything. I mean, this year everything's different. All the normal rules you can throw them out the window because people's lives have been impacted in such unprecedented ways. But I'm thinking as we go into the new year, there's going to be a lot of people who have been sitting on their properties waiting to sell, and maybe as things start to get back to normal and vaccinations start to roll out and the rest of it, and things start to open up, I think you're going to see a lot of good product come onto the market in Calgary and a bit of a housing boom in the spring because you've also got all this pent up demand and very little supply. I've got several buyers right now looking for the right house, and I'm on there every day, and the good stuff, it sells right away. So I think you're going to see a pent up supply and a pent up demand come out around the same time, and things start to take off. So if you're thinking of buying, you're thinking of selling, if you're wondering what the market's doing, that's sort of a basic look at it for now. And if you want to talk, give me a call.